This video will show you how to shade objects from observation. And we're going to split it into two parts. So first we're going to talk about what we look for when we're describing shadows on objects, and then the second part will be a time-lapse demonstration of shading. So first of all, what are we looking at when we're actually looking at things and looking for shadows? So here's my little still life that I set up, and the first thing we're going to look at is the light source. So in this case for me, my light source is this little desk lamp. And the light source is really important to pay attention to because that's going to tell you where all your objects are going to be light and where they're going to be dark. Objects are going to be lighter, in my case, on the left and on the top because that's where the light is coming from. And conversely, they're going to be darker on the bottom and on the right because the shadow areas are going to be the ones that are further away from the light source. So let's look for some of those light areas. First, we have the top of the book, the top of the cup, the top of the handle of the cup, the thread, now let's look for some dark areas. So we have the bottom of the thread, underneath the cup, on the right side of the cup, kind of even down inside there it's a little darker, underneath of the handle, the side of the book is a little bit darker. And we're also going to have not so much here, but you might see sort of some more medium areas where it's not quite dark, it's not quite light, but it's that transitional in between. You would usually have some of those middle values. And then super important also are our cast shadows. So those are the shadows that are underneath the objects and they go away from the light source. So you can see underneath the cup, underneath the book, even on top of the book. There's a little bit of the handle there that casts a shadow. And then here are some things you might see too. So some highlights, if you have a shiny object, like on the glaze of this cup, it's reflecting a little bit of light. And even on there's like a sort of foil shiny part of the pattern of the book that gave a highlight as well. And depending on your objects, you might even see some reflections. So here on mine, I would see it where the cup is shiny. It reflects a little bit of the other objects. It's almost a slight bit of a mirror image. And then sometimes you're going to see reflected light. There's not really too much here, but if I go ahead and zoom in, you can actually see underneath the spool of thread here, there's light that's bouncing off and it kind of gets into the shadow almost. So there's a reflected light within the shadow, kind of a funky thing that happens sometimes. So now let's do the demonstration. So I'm going to start with a light outline and I'm looking for sort of the basic shapes first, kind of comparing their sizes, if there's any overlap. I also like to put in my horizon line. I like to draw in the cast shadow shapes too. And then I'm going to start to shade. So I want you to try to get in the habit of holding your pencil from the back part of it, especially when you're laying down those big values. You can do a little finger smudging if you want, but don't overly smudge it all away because then you'll lose that contrast. And I'm sort of going back in and layering, pressing down harder where it's darker, building it up little by little in layers. It's not a one and done. Now on this book, this is a flat object, so I want to keep the shadows consistent and flat across that, that flat side. But that's different from the curved side of my mug and of my thread. I wanted to curve those lines because they're spherical rounded objects. I'm going to put those cast shadows in. This is my favorite part. It really makes it pop because it pushes like the objects sort of almost, they almost pop off the page a little bit when you put those cast shadows in. And then towards the end I just kind of go back in and do textures, details, refining. For the pattern on that book, I just kind of suggested that it doesn't have to be super detailed. And I like to put a little tone in the background too, just to make it look more cohesive and finalized. So that's how it looked when it was all done. Nice contrast, good gradation, there's tone on everything. Learning about shading is a crucial skill. We want to use what we know about where the light and dark areas would be, but we also want to be observing carefully as we draw. Shading will help our work to look more believable and three-dimensional.